I want to begin by defining terms clearly, because this debate becomes impossible if we use the word cult merely as an insult for beliefs we think are irrational. I study destructive cults, and in my work, a destructive cult is not defined primarily by what people believe. It is defined by systems of authoritarian control and psychological codependency. That's a really key word. Groups exist on a spectrum of authority and coercion. The key issue is not whether a belief is bizarre, conspiratorial, pseudoscientific, or religious. If we defined any group that had goofball beliefs as a cult, then any group could be called that, because anyone can accuse anyone of having goofball beliefs. And if everything is a cult, then nothing is a cult. So the key issue is whether a group uses those beliefs to dominate, isolate, exploit, or psychologically control people, not whether or not we judge their beliefs against what we think of as a yardstick of rationality. Flat Earth belief is certainly irrational. It is conspiratorial. It is frequently tied to biblical literalism, institutional distrust, anti-scientific thinking, and social alienation. But none of those things alone make something a destructive cult. If we apply actual cult analysis criteria, Flat Earth as a movement does not neatly fit the model. First, there is no centralized leadership structure. There's no equivalent of a David Miscavige, a Jim Jones, a Keith Raniere, or an L. Ron Hubbard directing a unified organization. There's no universally recognized prophet, no governing body, or chain of command. In fact, Flat Earth communities are notoriously fragmented. Different Flat Earthers accuse one another of being controlled opposition. They disagree on cosmology, theology, maps, astronomy, Antarctica, space travel, and often even the motives behind the supposed conspiracy itself. Some are deeply Christian, some are New Age, some are generic anti-government conspiracy theorists, some appear motivated mainly by contrarianism or online identity. The fragmentation is the opposite of what we usually see in high-control cult systems. Second, there is no consistent mechanism of coercive behavioral control. Destructive cults regulate members' lives. They control relationships, sexual behavior, finances, housing, employment, access to information, and contact with outsiders. And Flat Earth generally does not do those things. Most Flat Earthers continue to live ordinary lives embedded in normal society. They work jobs, maintain families, consume mainstream media, and move freely between communities. You do not generally see systemic isolation from non-believers. You do not see organized communal living. You do not see forced labor. You do not see mandatory financial exploitation. And you do not see centralized punishment systems for dissent. Yes, online harassment exists. Yes, social pressure exists. But social pressure exists in nearly every ideological community on Earth. The fact that people get weird, extreme, or passionate online is not an indication of a cult, but merely that someone is very invested in that topic. Third, Flat Earth is fundamentally decentralized, and this is crucial. What we're really looking at is closer to a networked conspiracy subculture than a destructive cult organization. Modern research increasingly describes Flat Earth as part of a broader post-truth ecosystem built around distrust of institutions and alternative epistemologies. In other words, the movement is less about one leader demanding obedience and more about a collective rejection of institutional authority itself. NASA lies, governments lie, scientists lie, academia lies, media lies. That mindset is conspiratorial, but conspiratorial thinking and cult structure are not identical concepts. Fourth, the motivations for joining Flat Earth are diverse. Some arrive through religion, others through political distrust. Sometimes people are just lonely and are online seeking community. Destructive cults usually narrow identity around a unified mission and authority structure. Flat Earth doesn't really do that consistently. If anything, Flat Earth often acts as a gateway or connective tissue between other conspiratorial communities rather than functioning as a coherent cult itself. Now, to be fair, and certainly as gone over, there are cult-like tendencies inside the Flat Earth culture. There can be intense in-group versus out-group thinking, hostility towards dissent, social reinforcement loops, paranoid worldviews, identity fusion, charismatic influencers, and deep epistemic isolation. Those are real phenomena, but cult-like traits are not sufficient by themselves to classify an entire movement as a destructive cult. Sports fandoms can display cult-like traits. Political movements can display cult-like traits. And online activist communities often display cult-like traits. That does not automatically make them destructive cults. If we call every conspiracy movement simply a cult, we destroy nuance because we stop distinguishing between decentralized belief movements, ideological subcultures, conspiracy ecosystems, new religious movements, and actual coercive authoritarian systems. A person trapped in a coercive high-control organization may need exit counseling, family reconnection, financial recovery, and trauma treatment. A person believing flat Earth may instead need media literacy, epistemological grounding, social reconnection, and restoration of institutional trust. Different paradigms are dealt with differently because they're not the same problem. Finally, I would argue flat Earth is better understood as a symptom of broader societal forces which are driving a great deal of change in our societies around the world, including declining trust in institutions, as I mentioned, algorithm-driven echo chambers, loneliness, polarization, conspiratorial thinking, and the collapse of shared standards for determining truth, which has led to an epistemological collapse over the very concept of truth and its usefulness. If we want to analyze these phenomena responsibly, we need conceptual precision rather than using cult as a catch-all label for irrational belief or goofy behavior. That precision is exactly what allows cult experts to identify genuinely coercive systems when they actually appear. Because the term cult should not be used as an insult or a dog whistle to indicate you think those people are just stupid. Most of them are very far from stupid, actually. So, to conclude, flat Earth is epistemically dysfunctional, but destructive cults are defined by coercive control, not merely false belief. And the codependency aspect of this between the leadership and the followers is something that just cannot be omitted when you're looking at a cult structure. So the flat Earth movement as such is not a destructive cult.